I talked today to Andy Lomas. Andy is a computational artist with a background in mathematics and in computer-generated effects for the entertainment industry, and has indeed won Emmy Awards. But his artwork now explores how complex sculptural forms can be created by simulating growth processes. Andy, could I start off by asking you about the words we're using? I mean, people use several terms: computer art, net art, digital art, computational art, new media art. Do you have any strong feelings for or against any of those terms?
I think all those terms have different nuances. I mean, I guess the two terms that seem to fit closest in mine are probably digital and computational, particularly computational art. That I guess what I'm really interested in is things like exploring complexity and sort of like emergence from systems of almost mathematical equations. So that these are computed things and things that are coming out of computation. It's actually not probably that important to me that it happens to be done on a digital computer. It's more that it's a computational process of simulation. And also I guess there's a problem maybe you get with digital art that people often think of. I mean, it's almost like the comparison between information technology and computer science. That that digital art can mean so many things. It can mean just using a digital camera. It can mean using Photoshop. Whereas for me, actually, things which are algorithms and code, or actually, code isn't right. It's an algorithm with computation, creating results that I find interesting and unexpected, and hopefully in some ways aesthetic. That's sort of really important to me.
Would you like to sum up your own artistic career? You started off more in the computer world, didn't you, than actually as an artist?
I guess I wouldn't say really the computer world. It depends how wide you want to define computer world. That I've never done computer science or been employed as a computer programmer. That I originally studied mathematics, but I guess I've always been interested in imagery and art and film and things like that. So when I was at university, I probably wasted far too much time as far as my tutors were concerned, making films, being involved with the university film unit and things like that. And when I left university, actually, with some friends, we set up a video production workers cooperative. And I worked on that for a few years. And it took me then a few years then to put two and two together. It's almost like I got a background in mathematics, but really interested in imagery and film and video and things, and computer animation graphics, basically, as a way of putting those together. But I guess back in the mid and 1980s, that wasn't such an obvious thing. And then I did a course in computer graphics animation, and then it was quite a lot of exploring my own work with that. In particular, it's almost like using the computers to compute things and doing things procedurally, doing things algorithmically. And there's always like two different lines I was doing. One line was the professional line, and it's almost like if you're doing things for professional computer graphics, everything has to be controlled and predictable. And you learn a lot of craft, but it's actually quite restrictive. But because you have to do everything in ways which are utterly predictable results, when anyone asks you to do any change for almost like directly, we need to make the picture change. Everything's great apart from that tree. We want that one leaf changed. So a lot of my own work was almost going completely the opposite way. Was almost like the interest in things that are surprising, things that can come up from a computer algorithm that are genuinely unexpected, and then exploring further. So it's almost like contingency and happenstance. And complexity. And also I'm really interested in just the whole idea of emergent complexity, which as far as I'm concerned is, was the source of the medium that life uses, that biology uses, again and again, complex systems, and emergent things from those. And a computer is basically a way of exploring that. And that's basically the core of my artwork, I guess, is the, exploring that type of system, the things that, it's a very often remarkably simple system with feedback and iteration that can create. You can't predict what it's going to do until you actually run it. And hopefully what it's going to do is things which are beyond even your expectations, and then you can follow further. So my artwork is largely following that, particularly in what's called morphogenesis. So it's the emergent, rich structures and forms that you can get from simulating growth processes. So instead of things being created from the top down, almost like traditional design, simulating processes and things like growth at the level of individual cells, and exploring what rich, hopefully interesting things happen through that.
A question I meant to ask you about later on, but it's perhaps appropriate now. I went to a conference on generative art recently, in which a lot of people a lot of scientists had discovered that you could visualize equations. And I sat through a lot of visualizations of equations, and I found myself wondering, where the art actually comes in. And you would say that it's when the equations start to do something you didn't expect.
I think that's your intention. I think. To be honest, it's also a very good excuse. It's like, if you're doing proper science, you have to have, coming up with hypotheses, and they have to be falsifiable and testable and objectively measurable and all these sorts of things. So there's quite a lot of freedom of just having something where it's almost taking you where your intuition and interest, your whim takes you. And also, I'm also just very driven by the aesthetic of it. So that, and certainly one of the things that drive me is just like, what is it about things in nature, which, I think have this incredible range of almost like deeply emotional aesthetic response, from things which are, incredibly beautiful to things which are incredibly disgusting and ugly. And that range of response, I think we're particularly attuned to almost like a certain type of rich organic complexity. And I think that's comes so much more from these sort of emergent processes than traditional top-down sculpting design or drawing, things like that. Or it's there's lots of art, I think, exploring similar ideas. But I think there's a reason that art does that. I think it's because we are so deeply psychologically attuned to things which are almost inevitably beautiful to disgusting. And that range of response in my art, I'm interested in doing things maybe that there are, if you take it apart, you analyse it, it's just potentially just like lots of white spheres. But that some people look at it, and I get responses in when I do exhibitions where people sometimes talk about it being mesmerically beautiful, and the next line is, I found this exhibition disgusting and disturbing. And at the moment I think, okay, maybe this is working on us at level. So I think that I'm interested in that I think that makes this more art. And largely I just do what I do because of curiosity, I guess, but that's certainly, those are two of the key things that drive me.
Andy, you won 2 Emmy Awards. You had a rather unusual background, I suppose, in the sense that you were very successful. How did you then get into being an artist? I
think it's not one thing that happened and then the other thing happened. It was more that they sort of worked alongside each other. So for many years, I guess, my artwork, what became more, started must be almost like a curiosity of exploring emergence using computers and simulation, and became more and more sort of an artwork from that, was something I was doing alongside working in the visual effects and animation industry. And they also played off each other. I learned a huge amount of craft of dealing with complex amounts of data. Dealing with a certain amount of visual richness and things like that. And one thing that was very quite playful is there's almost like there's using some of the lots of similar techniques, but then you're saying, well, you're allowed to do working professionally in visual effects, you have to do these controllable systems that with utterly predictable results usually. So doing stuff in my own time where it is almost deliberately the opposite, it's just more of a ways of keeping yourself sane working in that industry. So it was that this is my own projects by myself in my own one computer up in my attic, but I can do this by writing these programs and pushing further than sometimes you're allowed to working on films. Often you're only allowed to you craft things to what is needed on screen. You don't want to overcraft things, but it's also got to be predictable. Whereas doing things where I just want to push this to the limit that you can in the computer, and I want it to surprise me, and I don't want to know what it's going to do. I actually, I want to explore and be led by, what comes out. So it was partly a sort of reaction, but also compatible. It was saying I was doing both together at the same time, and also there are things like SIGGRAPH, which is like the big computer graphics conference that happens every year. So I'll be going to SIGGRAPH every year as a computer graphics supervisor and head of computer graphics at various companies and things. Often giving presentations about films that I've been working on, or trying to recruit people to work at various companies and things. But then potentially I'd be also then showing my own artwork in the art gallery at SIGGRAPH. So there's sort of compatibility there as well.
When did you first realise that you were producing, as it were, art that you could show in an art gallery or submit to the Newman Prize or something like that?
I suppose it probably most... I was sort of doing pictures and paintings right back to when I was a maths undergraduate, so things like that went way back. As far as actually getting to a point where I was starting to think, maybe this is exhibitable, maybe this is something that other people would be interested in, was probably sort of when I was working in the US. Actually, you worked on... just after the Matrix films I was working on, I then wrote some code to do simulating growth. Yeah, so I guess I first was doing things where I started wondering maybe I should start, exhibiting this, entering it for the art gallery at SIGGRAPH, and also there was, just wondering, is this exhibitable? But in the early 2000s, basically I was working at a company called ESC in the Bay Area in California, and actually just after finishing work on the Matrix films, we had a lot of computers around that I actually had quite a lot of machinery actually at work that I got allowed to actually just use for some of my experiments. And I wrote some code to do some simulating growth algorithms, quite similar to how coral grows. And some of the results of that I thought started to be interesting. And we actually had a corridor at work, which was like an open art gallery for anyone who worked at the company, so even if you're like a map painter, who's got a background in airbrush artwork, through to anyone working in the research and development point, anyone at the company could just put work up on the walls in the corridor. And I started putting up some of my pictures of creating things through what's called diffusion limited aggregation, or variations on what's quite a classic computer algorithm, where I was modifying it to be almost as if changing the environment that things are growing in. So it's almost like classic diffusion limited aggregation is like these things that grow in this very still environment. And I was thinking about, what happens if I bias it? What happens if I change it? What happens if I almost make it like, almost like turbulent flow that these things are growing in? How does that change things, the way that these sort of like organisms grow? So almost like changing environmental rules. And it started producing some, I think, quite interesting results. And that was the first stuff that I then entered to SIGGRAPH to say, hey, would you be interested in showing this in the art gallery? And it was, yes. And would you be interested in maybe giving a talk about this? Oh, yes. And then soon after that, I actually then moved down to Los Angeles, and there's a organisation, there's a sort of private art gallery down there called LACTA, Los Angeles Center for Digital Art, run by a guy called Rex Bruce. And I sent my stuff to him, and he was interested in showing it. And I then ended up actually working quite a lot with Rex and LACTA. When I was living in Los Angeles and just in downtown, there was this old disused cafe that had been converted into an art gallery in the downtown area. But those are the two main things that I did to start with, is probably like showing stuff at SIGGRAPH and showing stuff with LACTA.
And has the art taken over? I mean, are you a full-time artist, or more or less full-time?
Yeah, effectively full-time. Yeah, well, I'm actually teaching at present at UCL, at the Bartlett, at the architecture school. But that's only about a day and a half a week. Most of my time is now doing my own artwork. Basically got to a point where it was almost like, it seems to be going well. Maybe I've got to take this seriously. And there were a lot of things were coming up with potentials for exhibitions and potential for collaboration projects, things like that. And in order to take those seriously, it was either do this full time or turn things down. And I guess I used the word sabbatical with my wife, which is a great euphemism for going and doing something maybe slightly crazy, but it seems to be working out actually probably really well. It's I'm enjoying it. It's having the time and space to actually focus on the artwork has been great. So I've been doing that for about 3 years now.
the elephant in the room in any discussion about art is money. How was your own practice funded?
That's a good question. It's a ongoing story of right, so for many years I was just effectively funding this myself, working in visual effects animation, and then working with a software company for a few years where I was doing creating software for use in animation, but I was also only working 4.5 days a week. My extra half day was for my own artwork, and I was doing things alongside. Currently, I do sell prints of my artwork. I also do quite a lot of exhibitions, some of which pay artist fees and things like that, fees for being in the exhibitions. And through the combination of those, I'm probably more than covering my costs, which is good. The other side then is, it isn't enough at present to make this a full-time career that I can just depend on just what comes in from those two things. I am currently looking at what could be other types of artifacts which maybe could be priced better in the market. In particular, things like sculptures and wall-based time-changing media and things like that. So I'm looking at there's prints still quite well, but they don't sell for their price point that doesn't justify quite enough of a salary, I guess. And the other side is for a more stable thing. Actually, what I think lots of people in the digital art world do is having some feet in academia, actually doing teaching. So I'm currently a visiting lecturer at UCL, their architecture school, the Bartlett. Potentially going to be doing some work with goldsmiths in the future. And not working full time, because that's going to take over too much, to not allow me enough time to do the artwork, but be able to have something coming in from that as well as a sort of stable income. That's also very important. And the other side, to be honest, is after basically I had 25 years working in visual effects animation, and I saved up a reasonable amount from that. It's not enough for me to just retire and not worry about things at all, but that provides me with a very good basis so that I can actually spend time exploring more options. So it's a combination of things. Something that I need to have enough of an income coming in to keep on supporting myself and my wife and daughter, rather than this. And it's sort of working out, I think, reasonably well at present. Between a combination of things.
It fascinates me. I mean, digital artists seem to divide into three sorts. The ones who cheerfully work for nothing at all, and out of ideological motivations, as far as I can work out, and seem to survive on nothing at all, which is very interesting. The ones who do enormous installations at huge expense, and the ones in the middle, like yourself, who seem to be selling and doing all sorts of things as well. I'm interested in your comment about some exhibitions pay artist fees. I imagine most don't, but when do you, how do you sort of, when do you sort of move over from being somebody who gets your fees paid to being somebody who's thankful to be there?
Actually, I'd say my experience is most public exhibitions in public galleries pay, particularly in this country. I think there is a culture of, it might not pay a huge amount, but you're a public gallery, showing artists' work. If you are showing work where you've negotiated directly with the artist rather than showing work from some other institution's collection or your own collection, I think the standard seems to be to pay the artist a fee for exhibition, which So I've found in the majority of cases, actually having been paid to be in exhibitions, which is good.
To do things like winning the Lumen Prize, does that help?
Yeah, definitely helps. I mean, certainly it's, the art world, I think, is a very reputation-based world. There's, people's opinions and communication opinions to other people, things like that. And, one of the big influencer things is awards. And And also, I think one of the big things with Lumen is that they do a lot more than just rock up one evening and they give you a certificate and some money. That they do so much more in the way of like organising other exhibitions and seminars and because it was like the award that keeps on giving. I've actually got a lot of time for the Lumen. I think they seem to put in a lot to really nurture and promote the artists who have done things with them and continue to do so. And they Lumen I've got a lot of time for.
Just a random question, really. I've seen your prints advertised for sale online. So I think it's Saatchi Online. Do you, when people buy your prints, do you know who they are? Do they get in touch with you, or are they simply vague figures who sign a check?
It can be either. Yeah, I mean it's quite a lot of selling has been through people getting in contact, just emailing, saying, "Hey, I'm interested. I've seen you find your work online. I'm interested in getting some prints." Also, in recent years, in Ealing, they do an Open Studios event every year, and I've done that last 2 years, and another again this year. I actually find that really interesting from the point of view of I do so much work of talks and exhibitions within the computational and digital and art science sort of worlds. Doing something which is actually much more open to all sorts of people. The people come along and some of them have never really seen computer artwork like that I showed before, and some really interesting conversations, and actually end up often selling quite a lot through the Open Studios of the system. So that's that's a sort of different world.
Yes, I remember when you did an exhibition and talk at Waterman's. That was typical, presumably, that sort of thing. Yes. Do you think it's different in any way for you as a digital artist selling prints or whatever to somebody who's selling prints that they've drawn? If you can say this, a non-digital artist, a traditional artist.
It depends who you're talking to. I actually find surprisingly good reception from actually like through the Open Studios, things like that. I found very few negative reactions, actually remarkably positive. Where almost like most people are just surprised at first that they don't realise maybe what I'm showing is digital art to start with, and then almost always they seem to actually just really interested in okay, what is this? What's the story behind it? And actually they seem to be more drawn in by that. And I have had one or two bad reactions. There was a thing at the Zoo Art Fair quite a few years ago where they had it's like an art fair that they held at the Royal Academy, and there was one person who seemed interested in one of the works I had there, and then as soon as she realised that it was computer done, it was a complete switch off. It was like she was really interested. She thought it was a drawing, and then it was like as soon as digital, no, not interested at all. But that's relatively unique. I've had quite a few reactions like that.
And I imagine that as demographics change, you'll get less and less.
Yeah.
Yes, if you can have less than one. Have you had much contact with the Computer Arts Society, the CAS, in the course of your artistic career?
Oh yeah, very much so. I guess I first came across them, when I was giving a talk, actually together with William Latham at an event he organised down in Brighton to this called Mutator 2, and I met Paul Brown down there, and then he suggested that maybe I'd be interested in giving a presentation at the Computer Arts Society, and he put me in contact with Nick. So yeah, I've given talks there. Also, when I had an exhibition at Waterman's, they actually organised for one of the academics from Dundee to come down and give a talk about Darcy Thompson and morphogenesis and the relationships of mathematics with biology. Connected with the exhibition, so they sort of paid for Matthew to come down and also sort of helped put together the reception and stuff like that, and also just most recently with the CAS 50 sort of art collection. So I've got some work in that. So quite a lot of different things. I must admit, and I also go along to quite a lot of the events they organise and have been involved in EVA, the conference, over the years. So I've got a lot of time for the Computer Arts Society. It's great.
It's interesting that it's difficult to say exactly what it does,
Yeah, absolutely.
But
That's
it,
great.
It does a lot, you know. It puts
absolutely.
people together somehow.
I think it puts people together, and I think it's seriously interested in the history, the longer term culture. You know, what is this about? It's it was like a long, slow burn. I think that and their involvement together with the V&A, and the way that part of the V&A collection comes from the Computer Arts Society originally, and things like that. I think that's sort of like, not just being a place for people to get together and do a few talks, but being serious about connections with almost like, the academic study of computer art and things like that. I think that's actually really important.
I mean, there do seem to be several other organisations like CGRAPH, you mentioned, and ICEA.
Yeah.
How do they fit in your experience?
I must admit, I probably know less about ICEA than I probably should. And I know Sue and like quite well, but I've never actually been to ICEA. I've been to SIGGRAPH quite a few times, but I've always was more involved in the almost media industry side at SIGGRAPH. I do have some things in the art gallery a few times, and I know a few people on the digital art community. And I'm involved with, I guess they have their online community. But I've probably been more involved with CAS. Well, it's local. I'm based in London, and most CAS events happen. They're a UK-based organisation, and most of their events happen in London.
Yes.
So that's convenient for a start. And particularly when I'm basically sort of self-funded, so that going to SIGGRAPH or something like that. When I was being paid to go there as a professional working in the media industry, that made sense. But my main duties when going there is like, okay, I might be taking some pictures and putting up in the art gallery, but my main duties was as a representative of the company, that I was working for. So I was having to focus probably more on that side.
I mean, how would you see, what would you think the CAS can most usefully do in the next 50 years?
Oh, that's a real
nightmare question, I know.
It is. I think the diversity of what computer-based things are. I think one thing is quite interesting. If they have any particular focus, I think they are quite focused on things which are algorithmic and computational, things which could not be done without a computer. Not just that you're using a computer to do something cheaper, faster than it could be done otherwise. It's what makes computer artwork unique, rather than just being more of the same. I think that's when you look at the sort of the talks, the things that are involved, or the things that are in the CAS 50 collection, things like that. I think that's one of the big characteristics. And continuing the archive and documentation, I think that's really, really important. I mean, that there's 50 years history already, and then taking that further forward for another 50 years. I think that's really important.
And it's just interesting how we're seeing a kind of renaissance, I suppose, an interest in early computer art. The
Absolutely.
Gallery exhibition, various other things coming up just now, and I'm sure the CAS has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, I think they're big enablers of helping. It's how do you make sure that the documentation and the archiving and is actually available.
I'm also interested in what you say about your own artwork being more accepted. It seems quite clear that attitudes are now changing, and what was a bit outlandish 50 years ago or 30 years ago is now, you almost don't notice it, do you? I mean, that it's digital, because so much of life is digital.
Yes, but I think there's, ultimately against that, there's also maybe preconceptions that, actually the digital artwork being largely about things that could have been done with an airbrush but being done cheaper because you're using a computer instead. So I think that thing of the focus on what is it that can be done with a computer that can't be done, which is definitely where my interest is.
Yes.
And I think that's maybe does resonate with other people as well. That it's it's not just that almost like computer art is the way of undercutting other arts. It's what becomes a new contribution.
Yes. Yes. Andy Lomas, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.